So today I want to show you 10 tricks to make your hand embroidery life a little bit easier. Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, Sarah Homfray Embroidery. I would just like to start this video with a hello to a few people. So to Rosa, to Carol and to Miss Melby. They all clicked the thanks button and sent us a super thanks to show their support. We'd like to thank you very much for your contributions. Everything we receive does go back into making these videos. So if you enjoy a particular video that Jonathan and I have made and you don't want to become a patron or a channel member, you can still show your support and appreciation just by clicking that thanks button below. So I've been embroidering for a long time now, and you pick up little pieces of information and little tricks along the way that make your stitching life a little bit easier. So I thought I would share some of those with you today. So let's jump straight in. So the first thing that I want to talk about is threads. So let's start with these ones here. So any threads that come on a reel like this, you can get your normal sewing threads. Metallic threads often come, sometimes your Japanese threads come on a reel, and you can't find the end of your thread and you're scrabbling around here and you can't find where the end is and pull it out. All you need to do is to pull the end of the reel off. So if you just get your fingernails in there, that end comes off and then your end will come out from your reel, and then you can put that back on and use your thread, and then when you've finished with it again you can just wrap that up and put your thread back round there and then take it off again next time you need it. If you keep the sticker on the end, another little tip for you, you can also keep your needles in here, so you've always got a needle to use with your thread. Okay, so what about stranded skeins or your floss, your stranded floss? So I want to just show you about this magic way that it's made. So it's wound in a figure of 8 pattern. So that means when you pull one end, you can pull a piece of thread out and it doesn't mess your skein up. So I'm going to show you that now. Now it's always the end that comes from the middle of the skein. There'll be another one there. That's on the top. You can see that's on the top, but it's always the one that comes out of the middle one. And then if you just pull that, so I'll do that on this camera as well. So you just pull it straight up and it stops when it gets to that end, and that means you can just pull your thread out and use your thread, and you can leave it in that skein format. No need to wind it onto any bobbins. So a really good little tip to help prevent you getting your threads all knotted up is to use a nice short length. Now I know it's tempting to use a big long length so you don't have to keep rethreading your needle, but short lengths will definitely help you not to get it knotted up. And the way to tell the end, the thread length that you need, is you can pull your end out as we've just done. And then if you pull fingertip to the inside of your elbow, that's that long, and that's this elbow, not this elbow or your shoulder or anywhere else. Fingertip to inside of your elbow, and that is a really good length of thread to use just for standard sewing. Other things you might want a longer piece, but if you're just doing freestyle embroidery or something like that, that's a really good length to use so your thread doesn't get knotted up. And if you use that pull through method that I've just mentioned, that is the length that it will actually give you. So you pull it and it comes out once and it comes out back to the end, and that's the length you get. So really good length of thread to use so you don't get your thread knotted. So while we're talking about not getting knots in our threads, I want to show you how to strand your cottons or your floss properly. If you only want to use a couple of strands and you don't want to use all 6 and you don't want to get it all knotted up, what you do is you just separate the ends like so. This one has got 6 strands in it, and you just take one of those strands and then you just pull that out. And the best way to do it, I'll do it on this front camera here, is to pull it straight up, and then this never gets knotted. So you want another one straight up, and that will never get knotted. A really foolproof way of doing it. I just want to show you what happens if you try and do it with a couple at a time and not pulling it straight up. So if you just separate the ends there and then you pull, you can see when it gets near the end how that starts to knot up and starts to get itself all tied up. So it might seem quicker to do it that way, but if you just pull them straight out from the top, that will never get knotted. So if your thread comes in a different format, it's not a stranded cotton and it's something like this. So this is a cotton broder, and this is a perlé thread. Now these don't come in the figure of 8, they don't have that pull through method on them, they come in a big hank, so just basically a loop of threads, so you can't pull on the ends of that. So I'm going to show you what to do with those. So what we're going to do with this is we're going to actually cut through that hank, and then we are going to braid or plait the threads like so. And then when you need one, all you need to do is to take one from the top, pull it straight upwards as we've just done, and then you've got your thread ready to use, and this can be kept in this condition and this doesn't get all knotty. So I'm going to show you with this one here. So let's remove that one out of the way. So just take the labels off, open that out. They're quite long when they're opened up, and what you're looking for is this little bit here. Usually they're tied, so there's a little bit of an end thread tied around all of the threads so that you know where the middle of that is. So if you just find that little bit there and you open that hank out, you can see that clearly now. So it's just wound round and round, and if you start to cut that end and try and use it, that will end up in a knot very, very quickly. So what I'm going to do is cut through this end. This seems a little bit drastic, and if you wanted to use this thread for something else other than embroidery, if you were weaving and you wanted the length of thread, obviously don't do this, but I'm an embroiderer, so I'm going to embroider with it, so I'm going to cut straight through it like so, and then we're going to plait that or braid that. It's useful to have another hand available, so I've got a willing one behind the camera. Johnny, can I borrow your finger please? Thank you. Hello. Thank you very much. If you don't have a handy husband or a friend, then you could just put it around a doorknob or something like that. So I'm just going to braid that very loosely. It doesn't have to be very precise. So just splitting it into 3 pieces, and then each one goes behind the middle one each time. And that will just keep those threads together and stop them getting in a tangle. So make sure you go all the way to the end. Thank you. And then that ends up in that braid like so, and as I mentioned before, you can just take one from the top and pull that out from the top, and then that stays nice and neat and tidy. Once you've got that, you can put your labels back on so you know what colour it is. So all you need to do is to just slide that colour one on there like so, and you can fold that in half, and then your skein is ready to use. So we've talked about threads, so let's talk about threading your needle. Now, if you're going to do any embroidery, it's definitely worth learning all about your needles, how to choose the right size, how to thread them as well. That will make the rest of your embroidery so much easier if you can thread your actually thread your needle. So I'm going to give you a few tips about that. I'm not going to go into it in too much detail because we have a really good video on that. It's one of our most popular videos, and I give you lots of information on that and how to thread different kinds of needles and different kind of threads. But I'll just show you some of the basics here. So the first thing that you want to do is to cut your thread at an angle so that you've got a nice sharp point. Little fluffy bits on the end are going to make that very hard to thread. Second thing that you can do is you can apply a little bit of beeswax. Now do make sure it's actual real beeswax. You can get some alternatives which are not so great. This is a natural product and this will work really nicely, and then you can just run it through the end of the thread through the beeswax. And that just helps it to make it a little bit stiffer and to stick together a bit. Try not to lick the threads if you can, that's not very nice, chewing your threads. And then the trick with threading it is to take the needle to the thread and not the other way round. Don't try and poke the thread through the needle, take the needle to the thread. So I'm going to squash it between my thumb and my finger, take the needle to that thread, open my thumb and my finger up and pull it through like so. And if you practice that, that's a pretty foolproof method, so do check that video out for more details about that. So we've talked about threads and needles. Now let's have a little look at hoops. So if you're struggling to keep your fabric nice and tight, you're using an embroidery hoop, so one like this one here, and you struggle to keep your fabric tight and you find it's getting really baggy, what can happen is there are little gaps between the two hoops. So it doesn't matter how tightly you tighten this up, you're still going to get those little gaps, and the wood is a little bit slippy and the fabric can move on that. So to help with that, you can bind your hoop. I'll show you this one as well. I've got two here. So I've just bound the inner ring for these ones, and I'll show you what I'm going to bind it with in a minute, but I've just done the one ring on this one and on this one here, or you can do both rings, the inner one and the outer one, The only problem I found with this is if you're using a thicker fabric in it, sometimes the thicker fabric doesn't fit in when you've bound both hoops. So you might want to try one and see how you get on, and then if you want to, you can bind the other one as well. So all I've used to do this is a little bit of bias binding. That's what this looks like here. And I'm just going to wrap the inner hoop with it. So all you need to do is to just wrap that around, make sure each one covers the previous one, and all the way around like that. Again, I'm not going to show you that whole process because we do have a video on that, so do check that one out as well, and I show you how to do the whole hoop and how to finish it off and how to sew those ends together. And if you don't have any bias binding, you can also just use some lengths of cotton. This is just a calico here that I've just ripped up. I'm not even cut it up, just ripped it into strips, and you can wrap those strips around instead. So you can use whatever you have to hand. And if you want to know how much you need to wrap a hoop, because you don't really want to stop and start, then do check out the listing on our shop for the bias binding. We do sell that, and in that there is a list of different size hoops and how much binding you need to wrap each one. So once you've bound your hoop, you want to put your fabric in, but you want to do that without stretching it and distorting it and doing a lot of pulling on it. So this is a really good method to do that nice and tightly first time round. So just going to put your two hoops together, and you just want to make this finger tight, not too tight, just so it starts to bite. And then you can just turn it back half a turn just in case. Take the two hoops apart. Put the smaller one underneath your fabric. I've got two layers here. I've got a backing fabric on this. In the centre where you want it, and then just place that outer one on top. If you need to stand up and put the weight on the top, that works quite well. And then you're just going to press that outer one down over the inner one. And you can see straight away how nice and tight that is and how neat it is. I don't need to pull on it. I don't need to do any of that. Just turn it over and check on the back. The back is nice and tight as well. You can always just pull those two into the middle if you want to tighten that backing. But you'll find if you use that method, they should pull up nice and tightly together, and you don't need to fiddle about with your fabric. So one more thing before we leave this, if you're not working on your embroidery for a little while, a couple of days or more, I would say, I suggest you take your embroidery out of the frame to prevent it getting these marks from the ring frame on your fabric. Now this is a really good one. This is one I borrowed from the gold work embroidery technique, because this is the technique that you use to finish off the ends of the gold. But this also works really well if you've broken a thread, or if you've got one stitch left to do and you've only got a tiny little bit of thread and you don't want to start another piece of thread. This works really, really well. So all I've got here is quite a large needle with a point on it, and then I've got a little bit of thread through it. Now this is a buttonhole thread or a top stitching thread or a linen thread, something that's really strong and isn't going to break when you pull on it. And I folded it in half, and I've put the two ends in the same direction through the eye, so the two ends come out one side and the loop comes out the other, and you can see that loop there, and that's what we're going to use to pull our thread end through. So I'm going to demonstrate on this one here. So there's my little bit of thread that's been broken, or you're about to run out of thread, whichever. So you're going to take your needle down where you would be sewing that if it was threaded in a needle, pull that through so the two ends disappear through to the back. You've got your loop, and then you're just going to put that loop, the end of the thread, into that loop. Just catch the very end, don't go all the way up here. You want to be able to pull against something, and if you just grab it underneath, give it a little twist, and it comes through to the back. And you can rescue your thread, and then if you want to finish your thread on the back, you can do exactly the same thing. You can weave this under the stitches, catch the end of the thread and pull that through to finish off your stitch. I keep one of these in my needle case all the time, threaded up, ready to go, so if I need it, if I break something or if I'm about to run out, I can just use that quickly to finish off my thread. So the last thing that I want to share with you in this video is a really good little hack. I don't know where I learnt this one. So if you ever go away for the night, you stay in a nice hotel and you get some free shower caps, save the shower caps, because these are really good to protect your embroidery if you're not working on it or if you want to transport it somewhere. So they come in different formats here. They look like that when you take them out of the packet. And then all I'm going to do is put that over my ring frame like so, and it just protects your embroidery when you're not working on it, or if you need to make it portable and carry it somewhere, just protects your embroidery and stops it from getting dirty. So I hope you found some of those useful. Maybe you've learned something that you didn't know already. If you have a hack or a tip or a trick of your own that I haven't mentioned, then do let me know in the comments below. Perhaps if we get enough, we could do a little video all about your tips and tricks. And if you've enjoyed this video, do give it a thumbs up. That will help more people to see it. We've got loads more videos that I hope you'll find interesting. Maybe you want to check this one out here, and I look forward to seeing you next time.